Church on the Rise would like to welcome you to the ministry of the Word. We pray that it will help you find the will of God more clearly in your life.
The title of my message today is When Life's Not Fair. When Life's Not Fair. You've all heard the comment or the question, if God is love, why do bad things happen to good people? And it's certainly something that, if you haven't been unfairly treated or you haven't gone through pain and suffering for no reason, well, just hang around a bit longer. Just keep breathing. Because, there is hundreds of stories in here this morning. You've all got a story. You've all got your story. And today I want to start off with the story because it helps us get into the message. And if I've got my PowerPoint there. I was born in Victoria in a little place called Caloundra. And Caloundra was a small little country town and very much dairy farms there, and had a little hospital, and there was one bed for mums to have their babies. And many years later, I would have been 35, 40, met a guy called Kent Brose. And we worked it out that we were born in the same bed. Isn't it interesting to find somebody that you were born in the same bed? And we sort of joked and said, well, we hope they change the sheets between us, and had that little conversation. And then we sort of kept talking and realised that his wife also was born in the same place, and her name is Lola, and she is here this morning. Would you stand up, Lola? So give her a welcome. This is Lola Brose. And so Kent and Lola were part of our church in Brisbane. And Kent was, he was your Aussie ocker. Can you see him there? Like he's a bit like Chopper Reed, I suppose. But he hasn't killed anybody, thank God. But he was his own man. And, he was in our church, and I'll never forget the day Steve and I actually felt we wanted to plant a church, or the board did, in Bow Desert. And so I said to Steve, let's go down to Bow Desert and pray and see if God will give us a sign to plant this church. And so we went down there, and we were praying in the park, and we'd been there about half an hour. And around the corner came this little white ute, and Kent Brose was driving the white ute with a truck tyre in the back of it. We both said, that's the sign, because he lived down that way. And so we ended up starting a church there. Steve was pastor of it, and they've re-pioneered it, but there's a church there today, which is great. Kent, I wouldn't say was all that passionate, about church things always. He was always faithful. He'd come every Sunday. He'd come to church like that, in his stubbies and thongs. He would never wear long pants. And that was him. He was his own man, and he was doing what he felt he should be doing. And anyway, up here at Sippy Downs, Pastor Steve Penny took over the church up here. And for those who remember history, there was a water park there, and there was a building there. And they wanted to pull down the building and build a whole new one, which they have done. And they donated the building to the church in Halls Creek. And Kent felt that he wanted to take this building all the way to Halls Creek. And so he started the journey to be able to take this building. And so it meant that he had to have a triple trailer, not just a B-double, a triple trailer. And I think we've got the picture of that up here. So he actually had to build, well, he didn't have to build, but he was a very clever man, but he built the dollies to put the trailers on, and he had to buy the truck, get the money, make it all happen. And just time went on, and in fact it was a 4-year project for him. It took 4 years to put it all together, get the money, finally get the load on, and get on the journey. And so he took the load out to Halls Creek, then went back to Alice Springs and took a load of bricks up to Catherine for another church, and was on his way home with another buddy driver. And as they were travelling home, Kent was in the passenger side, and it was evening, and a guy had been drinking all afternoon in one of the pubs in one of the local areas just outside of Mount Isa. And so he took off in his ute, and being totally drunk, was driving on the wrong side of the road, and the truck hit the car and went right over the ute and flipped the truck. And so the truck went on the left-hand side, and tragically Kent was killed at that moment. We were all in shock at the time, because he was one of these guys. He could ride a motorbike faster than anybody else. He could drive a car. He had an E-type Jag, and he was one of those guys that you never thought that would happen to. In fact, it was around the time that Steve Irwin died and Peter Brock. It was just around those few weeks. In fact, the three of them died over the 3 weeks. But during that time, we all said, well, why do bad things happen to good people? It was probably the first time in his life that he really grabbed a hold of something in God and went for it with all of his might. This is a mission from God. I'm on a mission from God. And yet, tragically, he's killed as he's coming home from that. And it introduces our subject today, because all kinds of stuff happen to us as we go through life, and it can be quite challenging. Tragedy is hard to understand, hard to explain, and hard on faith. Some people lay the blame for all that happens at the feet of God. They become bitter and cynical toward him. They ask for explanation but get silence. They ask for understanding and are baffled. Why have some people got cancer? Why some people are involved in tragic accidents? Why do some people suffer premature heart attacks? Why do some people live in constant pain and others are trouble-free? Why did the thieves target our house? We tithed, we worked hard. Why did we have a stillborn child? I'll be a good mum. Why is it me that has the bad back? We pick up this story today of Job, where he had lost everything. The only thing left for Job to lose was his life, for him actually to die. He'd lost everything else. And so we see his story thus far. We see that his friends came along, and sadly they didn't offer any comfort or help. And in the end, Job is sitting there, lost everything. He's unfairly judged by his friends, and it all falls silent for the first time in maybe many months. The story of Job probably goes for up to 12 months. We don't believe that it's a long, drawn-out period, and there's numbers of scriptures that helps us. But Job feels abandoned by God, the God he loved and served. He feels rejection from friends below and God above, and he's longing for God to show up and explain what's going on. What would you say to Job if you rocked up at this point? There, Job. It can't get any worse. Sorry, mate, just hang in there. You'll get through it. What would we say to Job? Here, look, I'll shout your coffee, mate. And all those things are valid. But what did God say to Job when he turned up? I find it very interesting because before I saw God's answer, wouldn't have come to Job like God came to Job. I'm the emotional type, and I would have, try to put my arms around him and say, "Oh, mate, it's tough. You're going through a tough time here." And, try and give him some empathy and just, love on him a little. What would God say? "Well, Job, sorry, mate. Look, it was actually the devil that made me do this. He challenged me about you because he said that you're a bit of a fake. And if I took everything off you, if I allowed everything to go, you'd deny me." So really it was a duel between, me and the devil. And that's what it's all been about, Job. I'm sorry, mate. I'm really, really sorry you've had to go through all this. That would have been something that maybe I would have thought God would have said to Job. But in chapter 38, and we read 1 to 3, and I think I've got it on the overhead, this is what God said to Job. First of all, God comes to Job in a whirlwind. So there was no gentle breeze blowing. I would have just had a nice gentle breeze and there, mate, it's going to be all right. But God actually turns up in a storm. And this is what he said. "Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Brace yourself, or get a grip, mate. Because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them." I love the way the Message Bible puts it. Why do you confuse the issue? Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Pull yourself together, Job. Up on your feet. Stand tall. I have some questions for you, and I want some straight answers. For all the counsellors that are here today, please take note. This is the way God counsels. And so God begins to speak to Job. And in Job 38, 4 to 11, he says to him, "Where were you when I created the earth?" Yeah, good. If you can keep up with me, Jared. "Tell me, since you know so much, who decided on its size?" Certainly you'll know that. "Who came up with the blueprints and measurements? How was its foundation poured? And who set the cornerstones? While the morning stars sang in chorus and all the angels shouted praise." Must have been a glorious moment, wasn't it, when God created the earth and the world. And here's all the stars singing and the angels praising. It was just an awesome time. We get a bit of a glimpse of creation. "And who took charge of the ocean when it gushed forth like a baby from the womb?" That must have been a real moment. That was me. I wrapped it in soft clouds and tucked it in safely at night. Then I made a playpen for it, a strong playpen, so that it couldn't run loose. And I said, "Stay here. This is your place. Your wild tantrums are confined to this place." Job 42, "Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him." So instead of God coming along to Job and giving him answers, he's actually questioning him. He's got him in the dock and he's firing these bullets at him. And the questions that he's got, he's actually giving him a biology exam, a lesson in zoology, and answer the questions of the universe. "You're a big boy, you know so much, come on, you're going to challenge me. Why don't you answer these?" And God goes on in Job 38:34, he said, "Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that an abundance of water may cover you? Do you send lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, 'Here we are'? From whose womb has come the ice? Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook? That was a fire-breathing monster at the time. God says, I just get a little fish hook out. God amazingly didn't answer anything specific to his suffering. Over 4 chapters, the word suffering isn't mentioned. God in all this was bringing Job to the realization of what it meant for a man to live in a universe created by God. Creation exalts God's wisdom, God's power, God's purpose, and his love. This reply to Job tells us about a wise creator who by his power and wisdom created the universe and by his care watches over it in love. What God was trying to say to Job is, hey buddy, I made all this out of nothing. I make it all work. And you can trust me with your life. That was what God was trying to say here to Job, that you can trust me because I am the all-wise God. I am the all-powerful God. Why did you ever doubt me, Job, that it wasn't going to work out right in the end? And so he's challenging him here with this. In Revelation 14:7 it said, he said in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea and the springs of water. Romans 9:20 says, but who are you, O man, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to him who formed it, why did you make me like this? Girls, do you ever look in the mirror and say, God, why did you make me like this? Do we ever look at our lives and who we are and question God? Oh, God, you could have done that a bit better. You're all getting a new body in the life after. But you know, we often question the wisdom of God. We often question him when we shouldn't. And God is challenging Job, and he's challenging us today that God is the all-wise God. Romans 11:34 says, who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? There's no gentle breeze here and no still voice. It's blowing a gale, and God is challenging Job to pull himself together. You know, and I think when we are going through our challenges, when we are going through times when life's not fair, this story ought to help us. Firstly, get our focus, as Pastor Mike was saying, our eyes on God, to say, God, I can trust you. I can trust you. And recognize that in all this, we can be a blubbering mess and call a sympathy party and wallow in the muck, or we can get a grip on our lives and say, no, God hasn't finished with me yet. And he is still to write the last chapter of my life. And you know, in counselling and helping one another, we need to embrace one another. We need to show mercy and love. But you know what we need to say to some people sometime? Hey, buddy, get a grip, will you? It's going to be okay. God's still on the throne. And you can trust God with your life. No matter what's going on, you can trust God with your life. Because we can't understand, and in our finite minds, we don't always agree with what's going on. We used to have little mini horses, and they used to get colic. And so they'd lay on the ground and squirm and carry on. And so, you know, I could have gone along to that little horse and said, there, you poor little thing. Oh, darling, you know, it's going to be okay. You know what you do to a horse that's got colic? You say, get a grip. Get up on your feet. You walk them around. if you still can't get them over it, you got to put a tube down their throat and pour oil down there to get it all moving again. Do you know, in God, it's we can waste so many years of our life by wallowing in a pool of self-sympathy and mistrust and questioning God, and we can lose the very thing that God is trying to do with us through the journey. When Pastor Steve Penny lost his son through cancer, Ron and I went to the funeral, and I'll never forget he said this. He said, Marion and I are not asking why, but what we're asking is what. What are you wanting to do through all this, God? Why won't always be answered. But you know what? There's always a what. God is wanting to do something in our lives and purpose in our lives through it all. Can you trust him enough to do that? Job then said to God, in Job 4:44, he said, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I take back everything I said, and I sit in the dust and ashes to show my repentance. So Job was, I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry I questioned you through all this. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough. And he started to really believe that he could trust God. And in the end of Job, the whole chapter there, Job actually says, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear. In other words, I've heard about you, God. I knew you from what was said about you. But now I can see you. Now my eyes see you. And so God wants to show himself in a greater way through our pain. You know, I find it's pain that I understand myself more and God more. It's not in my successes in life, but it's in my pain. And in your pain, you will find yourself. You will know yourself. And in your pain, you will know God in a greater way. Faith believes that God is too kind to be cruel. Faith believes that God is too wise to make a mistake. Faith believes that God, the God of the universe, has a plan for our lives. He is busy weaving it out in his time. You do not always need to know why, but you do need to know that your Heavenly Father is good. Paul put it this way, and we know that all things work together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Isn't that a great verse? If we can just live that and believe that, do you know we're going to be wonderful lights in our world around us. We're going to be able to get a grip on life and stand strong in those difficult times. Carved on the walls in a concentration camp were these words, I believe in the sun even though it does not shine. I believe in love even when it isn't shown. I believe in God even when he doesn't speak. You know how powerful. Job proved it was possible for humans to love God unconditionally. And that's agape love. That's the unconditional love. I don't love him because of what he does for me. I just love him for him. I believe him. And so today, the message of Job really is one that you can trust God. Thank God for the last chapter. Thank God that we can look at this story and say, God, you can be trusted. Next week, I'm going to speak about double for your trouble. And that'll be a great week. But you know, this week is all about, hey, this is the gutsy stuff. This is where it really matters, that you and I know God enough to trust God. And if you don't know him that well, get to know him, because you can trust him. And this story here tells us that. Just while the worship team are coming this morning, I'd like to just finish off with a a story, and it's a story about a young husband who lost his wife to cancer. Just before I tell the story, I just want to honour Lola this morning for being in church today, loving God, loving Jesus after it all. Give her another clap today. So we honour you, Lola. Yeah. A young husband lost his wife to cancer. He was left alone in the world to raise their young daughter. The father and the daughter's first night alone in the big house was not an easy night. The dinner table was desperately lonely, and as bedtime came that evening, an electrical storm broke out. Give me a little bit of music there if you can. Thank you. The lines were down and their house was suddenly without electricity, still dark, quiet and empty. And when the dad tucked the little girl into bed, the room was pitch black. Whew, I hope I can get through this story. Daddy, are you there? Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. Daddy, but I can't see you. Sweetheart, I'm here. I'm talking to you, aren't I? Daddy, I've never been this scared before. Sweetheart, I'm here. Trust me. Everything's going to be okay. With that word of assurance, the little girl put her head on the pillow and fell fast asleep. The dad made the long and lonely walk down the hall to his own bedroom. The storm continued to blow and howl against the house. It was so dark he couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Lightning suddenly flashed across the sky, lighting up the bedroom momentarily. Then the darkness draped the room again like black velvet. Getting into bed, the widower stared up at the ceiling. His heart felt like the room, dark, empty and stormy. He turned to his broken heart toward heaven. Father, are you there? He felt the assurance of God. Yes, son, I'm here. But Father, I can't see you. My son, I'm here. I'm talking with you, aren't I? Father, I've never been this scared before. Son, I'm here. Trust me. Everything is going to be okay. With that assurance of heart, the dad put his head on the pillow and fell fast asleep. I think it's a great little story. It says, hey, if we will just trust him, everything's going to be all right.
We trust you've enjoyed the ministry of the Word, and if you'd like more details or how to contact our church and its resources, look at our website www.churchontherise.org.au.